crowdfunding, the next new frontier. These are the voyages of the credit card Visa. Its continuing mission to explore new boxes, to seek out new rules and new shiny components, to boldly spend what no man has spent before. Greetings, Earth creatures. I'm Jeff, and this is Tabletop Toolbox. Today, I'll be taking you on a journey 2.5 million light years away to the heart of the Andromeda Galaxy. Well, actually, it's just the edge. Andromedas Edge, as it is, comes from the minds of Luke and Maximus Lori and is published by Cardboard Alchemy. And that's a pretty decent lineage, given that Luke designed such games as Dwellings of Eldervale, clearly the spiritual predecessor of Andromeda's Edge, and Cardboard Alchemy brought us Flamecraft, a delightfully produced game about humans and dragons co-living in a quaint, lovely town. Andromeda's Edge is not about a bunch of delightful space aliens co-living in a distant galaxy. It's about tracks, and it's about showmanship. I mean, just look at all these shiny doodads, these fancy little ships, these big plastic thingies. With all this stuff, it's easy to think that Andromeda's Edge is packed to the gills with complex strategies, maybe epic space battles and unique asymmetry between the players. But then it kind of throws you a curveball. In fact, it's even right there on the Board Game Geek landing page. On your turn, you either launch a starship or return your ships to your station. I mean, it can't be that simple, can it? Can it? See, here's the thing. Usually in these videos, I try to give a recap of as many of the rules as I can comfortably do in a handful of minutes. I laboriously try to boil down the different actions and condense it all down to a thick, hearty broth. It's just enough to quench the palate and give you that warm, soothing sensation that you have at least some idea of how the game plays. But with this game, more than any other game I've ever reviewed, I'm less interested in talking about what you do in this game as I am in explaining to you just what this game does. I don't want to go into the details of how you can launch a ship on your turn, taking it from your station board and placing it on the main board. But if you have no ships on the board, then you have to launch to an unoccupied region where there's no other ships. Subsequent launches must be in range of any ships you currently have on the main board, but not on the same space as one of your ships. Then if a raider is in your range, it'll move into your region, unless one is already there, as you can't have two different raiders in the same spot. At this point, any player with ships in range of your region can also travel to the region before triggering a battle. Players will then roll their dice, arranging them from highest to lowest values. Where am I? When am I? My trepidation, mind you, isn't because of complexity. Thing is, these spaces on the board don't even do that much. You can convert resources to credits, which in fact can be used as a few other resources. You could purchase a few tactics cards. In fact, the most humdrum action of them all is visiting one of Andromeda's 5 types of planets. Doing so could let you collect a moon, if there is one, or you could just get the resource printed on a tile. So your whole turn could be visiting a planet and getting a block of ice, which is, pretty cool. There is, of course, the development office, which lets you install one of these chunky plastic developments onto one of your transport ships. But again, I don't want to go into the details of what it takes to build one of these things. In fact, if anything, I'd much rather talk about how they do virtually nothing for the rest of the entire game. I will, though, talk a little bit about the Maximus and Odessa fields, where modules can be purchased from these displays at the top of the main board. Purchased modules are added to your personal space station and are later activated by ships when you choose to return them from the main board. This engine that players can build and fire off is one of the most substantial parts of the whole game, in more ways than one. It can eventually dump loads and loads of resources into a player's station, and if they've built it right and planned for it along the way, and haven't gotten wrecked by one of the game's unexpected little quirks, can even let them fire off additional actions, like placing out more of these developments, building more ships, buying more modules, or sliding their markers up these tracks. These tracks are ultimately what the game is all about. Just 5 of them this time, unlike the 8 from Eldervale, and in simple columns versus the octagonal color wheel from that game. Advancing these tracks will give you various rewards, and it will also progress the game through random events, which often dole out little rewards to players, spawn the neutral raiders into the galaxy, and provide scoring which is based on these tracks. And you'll also score points from these tracks in 2 different ways at the end of the game. How do you move up these tracks? Well, I've actually already covered all the ways. Building a development on a planet will bump you up the corresponding track. Slotting a module into your station will bump you up that same colored track. Some modules themselves can let you bump yourself up the track, and even some reward tiles on the tracks themselves may give you an extra, just, a little nudge, little wiggle, a little bump, did it bump up the track. Alright, listen, maybe you've been picking up on my little trail of breadcrumbs I've been sprinkling behind me on my trek through this video. Maybe you've picked up on my little hints, my little innuendos, but it's time for me to set my phasers to stun and power up my shields, because I don't think this game is very good. It starts here at the rulebook in this mess of a components list. I realize this is a first world gripe, but trying to match this image up with the component list in the storage guide was a nightmare. But quibbles aside, I read this rulebook cover to cover a number of times and still just felt like I had no idea how to play the game. It's all these side panels and text bubbles. It's very non-linear and thus very hard to follow. So I watched a few videos and that really helped, but then we sat down to play and, not surprisingly, ran into questions on specific cards, faction abilities, etc. Luckily, each card has a number on it. Each module, each faction card, each tactics card has a tiny, sometimes impossible to read, little number on them. So those numbers are present here in this appendix booklet, right? No! Those numbers aren't in here at all. And the module cards aren't even organized by type for the 5 different tracks. They're organized by what they do. So you literally have to scan the card art in this booklet and try to find an image that looks somewhat similar to the card you're confused by, and good luck. It doesn't help either that there's some duplicate iconography with different uses. Take the die symbol shown next to each ship. This indicates how many dice that ship adds to your combat roll. Then look at these modules with the same die symbol at the top of the card. The first time a player saw this and asked what it meant, I honestly assumed it added to your combat roll. Nope, it's a push your luck element that determines if the module delivers double rewards and then damages itself, because, why not? Speaking of those faction powers, there's a lot of them, and they're all pretty decent. But some might be a bit more decent than others, like the Pulse War Refugees. This faction pushes up a player on the supremacy track even when they lose a fight. Now, most of these faction abilities trigger under some pretty specific circumstances, like not having any ships on your station at the start of your turn, or completing a column of new modules. Now, I'm no mathematician, and I won't be able to play this game 100 times to build a scatter plot of results, but a player power that you can trigger on every 3 or 4 of your own turns versus one that can be used a few times between your turns does look on paper to be quite a bit lopsided. Personally, I'm probably taking this faction out of the box. What I can't do anything about, though, is the disparity of these tactics cards. Now, I'm not going to go into the weeds here, but these blue cards are called diplomacy cards. Players can play them before a battle to affect that battle in a number of ways. I have one here that says the fight ends immediately and the player playing the card gets to climb up the supremacy track. Awesome. I'd love to have this card. But instead I got this one here that also says the battle ends, but I have to pay a resource to every opponent. F this card. Luck is luck. I get it. But this game is jam-packed full of random chaos. Conflict dictated by dice, cards with a wide range of benefits and hindrances, and even these raiders that can punish players for losing a fight, this game has no problem kicking you when you're down. And frankly, I just don't get it. Listen, this is my review and this is my channel, so allow me a quick deviation from the norm to wax on about another recent release, Rock Hard 1977 by former rockstar Jackie Fox and published by DeVere. This had a huge release during Gen Con this year. Now, I honestly had low expectations for it, but halfway through my first play, just a few weeks after it came out, I absolutely fell in love with this game, something that frankly doesn't happen very often. So imagine my surprise when I jumped on the hype train playing myself, only to immediately start hearing complaints from fellow reviewers that this game was too random, that a deck of event cards that affects all players equally and a single die you could avoid the entire game was still too unpredictable. Pardon my pun, but the unpredictability in Andromeda's Edge is galactic. And it's not fair, it's not balanced, and maybe you're fine with that, honestly. But this game has a lengthy setup. It takes a rather long time to play, even with the occasional lackluster moon collecting turn. And to have your entire strategy fall apart because a player wiped out an entire fleet with a single transport ship can leave you sitting there thinking, why am I even playing this? And there's one other aspect that makes this game difficult to play. I already discussed the challenge of the rulebook, but even after you've comfortably learned how to play the game, you will very rarely ever play that game. Right off the bat, you have a faction card that changes the rules for you. These modules will challenge or change the rules. These ship upgrades change the rules. These tactics cards change the rules. Even that raider card sitting all the way over there, that card changes the rules. I said way back in this video that this game isn't hard. The strategy here becomes evident after a play or two, but the rules are changed on the player so haphazardly and so frequently that it often becomes difficult to remember, or easy to forget, however you want to view that glass, what rules are present at any given point in the game. In every play of this so far, someone, quite often myself, has thrown their arms up in despair or slapped a table because they just realized that they had overlooked the benefit, often for the entire game up to that point. And all of that effort, all of that frustration just to climb up some tracks. I mean, don't get me wrong, the general puzzle of the game is fine. I love triggering off those modules on my station, but it happens so infrequently, even in a two-player or solo game, that I have yet to ever feel like the juice was worth the squeeze. In fact, the only thing I really remember from Dwellings of Eldervale was that feeling that all I was really trying to do throughout the whole game was bump myself up those colored tracks. In Andromeda's Edge, you can have the best fleet, have a fine-tuned engine of modules at your station, have a variety of developments across the board. But if you haven't maxed out a few of these tracks, none of it matters. Those developments, for example, give you a small one-time bonus during the game and might lend some dice during combat. But beyond that, they just provide an endgame score based on, you guessed it, your place on these tracks. It's a bummer. This whole game is a bummer. Andromeda's Edge is a reminder that flashy components and big crowdfunded projects can often confuse folks into thinking that a mediocre game is a masterpiece. I've said the same thing in the past, most recently about Voidfall, which I actually think is a better game than Andromeda's Edge. But it's another one of these needlessly overproduced games with laughably long setup times, which is made even worse by a convoluted storage solution, one that, in this case, puts the main board in the bottom of this box, guaranteeing that you'll have to unpack a bunch of crap you probably don't need just to get the main board on the table. And you know what sucks about all of this? This is my copy. I bought this, and every time I've played it, I've had this little itch, this little icky feeling of buyer's remorse, like I've bought something that I'm afraid to put away. I'm afraid to stop playing with it because I know I'll never get it out again. And I mean, really, that too is kind of a bummer. Well, hey, thanks for watching. Thanks for stopping by. And if you can keep it civil, you're more than welcome to disagree with me in the comments section. Or you could make some better use of your time and check out some other content here on the channel. Either way, take care, and I'll see you next time here on Tabletop Toolbox. From my galaxy to yours,